My name is Sunshine Thomas Bear, and I am the Cultural Preservation and Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Winnebago Tribe.
And I'm Carolyn Fiscus. I'm currently a part-time instructor for the University of Nebraska at Omaha in Native American Studies. And I was the director of Native Studies here at Little Priest for a few years. And I've been teaching on the Omaha and the Winnebago reservations for over 51 years.
Wow.
So I know some of you guys still owe me a paper and money. Cultural genocide, kind of in a shortened form, you could read, there's all sorts of research about it, especially among tribal groups in this country, but cultural genocide is a result of a colonizer coming in and colonizing your people. And colonization is the process of one people group overpowering another people group and then making that people group believe that their language, their ways, their looks, how they live their life, their religion is completely wrong, especially if it's different than the colonizer. And as far as, to put it simply, the tribes in this country, on this continent, were colonized by the Europeans who came in the 1400s to look for resources and land, and we've continued to be colonized. So they tried to take all of our cultural things, our religion, our language, our ways of life, and change them over to how they are. Because the colonizer always thinks that their way is the only way and a good way. And that's another way the colonizer defeats a people too, is they convince them that they're not appropriate. So that's, in a nutshell, what I would call cultural genocide. And the tribes today, we're trying to undo that. And there's a big movement, and there's a lot of research being done about decolonization. And it's hard, because some of us, like my generation, my mom went to boarding school. I didn't have to go to boarding school, but I went to a mainstream society school. And the whole time I thought I was wrong being there, because I was dark-haired and dark-eyed and everybody else was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and they made us feel way different and maybe not good enough. That's what a colonizer does.
So we live with the shame
Yep.
of our identity and our culture.
Right. And being different, we're told, oh, you're so different and you're not like us and you're not good enough. And so after a while you kind of take that in, and you think, oh, okay, well, I'm not good enough.
Yeah, and it's been happening for
500 plus years.
Yeah, 500 plus years. So now to decolonize, it's
hard. Because
Yeah.
you don't know what to do, what to go back to. I hear that all the time among our tribal relatives. Like, well, I'm not traditional. Well, what is that?
Yeah.
There's not a person alive who knows the old traditions today.
Yeah.
But old medicine man told me this one time while I was in ceremony. He said, you pray and sacrifice and sit with the spirits and they'll tell you how to be. Mm-hmm. And I thought, at first that sounded like some kind of movie.
Yeah.
But, after you pray and sit with the spirits or sit out in the timbers and enjoy the life that the Creator's given us, then after a while you begin to hear those teachings. Oh, we need to do it this way. You need to do it that way. And you need to learn your language. You need to, because the language is so beautiful. It like paints this beautiful picture of what's going on. Mm-hmm. So, and it's hard. It's hard when it's either gone or almost gone.
And it is almost gone here.
Yeah.
We are at a very near extinction.
Endangered is what they call it.
Yeah. And with only a handful of speakers and not enough resources and people, and it's hard to get people to want to do that as well. Not only the language but other cultural things.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard.
Well, here's another part too that I began to understand only recently, I guess because I'm old. But I think that, and I used to talk to some of my relatives who were in leadership roles in this community 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And I said, you know, maybe it's time for us as Ho-Chunkers, Winnebagos, to redefine what that is. Mm-hmm. It's okay to define it and get a checklist. You know, okay, if you're going to be Ho-Chunk or Winnebago, you got to be able to do this and this. You may be serving the people. You should be educating yourself, taking care of your little families, teaching in the school, volunteering with the youth, or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
You know, getting a driver's license. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, and we need to have, you need to have a command or can pray in the Ho-Chunk language, say a prayer, sing a song, you know the Little Priest songs. I hear them everywhere, and I know that that's one of the Little Priest songs, and I think there's 5 of them, I think. 3 or 5, I don't remember. But I don't know the words or anything, but I recognize it when our brothers and our Junshke sing. I know that that's a Little Priest song. And so, person should learn that.
Yeah.
You know, you should learn at least one of them, and then you can be whatever, you know, you can be considered Winnebago or Ho-Chunk, however you want to call yourself. But it's hard because no one wants to make up that definition, and then we want to argue with each other about what's the right definition. And I think that's a big issue in our communities, not just here, but all our Native communities. People want to argue about stuff.
Yeah.
You know, they want to argue about, one of them old timers said one time, you know, they always want us to argue about the Creator, and they taught us not to do that. We don't argue about the Creator, or who's got this Creator or that Creator, but it seemed like we learned that from the colonizer.
Yeah.
That's a power thing and a shame thing, you know. I kind of got carried away there. Sorry.
No, that was great. And just to kind of step in, one of the things that's new for a lot of tribes, and new as in the past 100, 200 years, is blood quantum.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And how that was introduced from the outside.
That's a colonizing thing.
That is a colonizing thing, and we gladly use it against ourselves.
Yeah, it's an internalized oppression
Yeah.
now. Because it used to be, this is the way I understand from old stories and stuff, you know, is if you were in the community and you were contributing and people adopted you, took relatives. It's one of the sacred ceremonies, the taking of a relative, you know. Then you were in. You were just as much a part of the tribe as anybody else. And but we've forgotten that now. We want, because of consumerism and that colonialism, and the reason they made us use blood quantum is because they didn't want to give us our land. They wanted to say, oh, well, you aren't Indian enough to get lands back in 1887. So we went right along with it in 1934. Oh, okay, well, yeah, we don't want to share resources with people who aren't so much blood or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know. I don't agree with it, but I understand why it is, but the other part of it is I don't understand why we continue to use that.
I agree.
You know, and my mom used to talk bad about people who were full-bloods. You know, because they acted white or whatever, you know. You know that old way we always pick on each other.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. It's part of the colonization. It's part of the oppression. Part of the genocide, too. You know, to make us fight amongst ourselves.
Now, you had mentioned earlier that there's actually steps of genocide, and I myself am unfamiliar with the steps, and I'm sure plenty of people listening are. What are the steps of genocide, and specifically cultural genocide?
Do you want an example, too, or just...
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Love it.
Well, the first thing that an oppressor or colonizer does is they classify people. So the first thing, the classification, they would categorize people to distinguish them by ethnicity, race, religion, or nationality, or how you look, or how you live, So they would classify us, and see, that's where that whole blood quantum and everything, that's part of the genocide. They're going to classify you. And even in the law, for the Allotment Act and for other laws, it says if there are no more full-bloods in this group, then that tribe can be terminated.
Yes.
It says that in the law. So full-bloods, I mean, who are they to tell us that we have no more full-bloods? And I know, I remember way back when they first started giving out per caps. Geez, how long ago has that been? Before you guys were born, I think. I know I said they should just give everybody, when they redid the rolls and stuff, give everybody full blood and start over. Everybody should be 4/4, and then, because in the law it says, after 4 generations, these people, the classification, will breed themselves out of existence. Hello?
Yeah, and we are still using it.
Yeah, we're still using that breed ourselves out of existence method. And some people are really, they're really adamant about that blood quantum. A tribe in New Mexico, the Lagunas, about 10, 15 years ago, they switched from quarter blood requirement to half and threw people off their rolls. Now, what good is that? But there are tribes that did that, and they are doing that.
But I think it's the lack of understanding, right?
Right.
Of the law and what it says in the fine, tiny.
Right, and the fact that classification is part of the genocide.
Yeah.
Because these colonizers, they could care less if there were natives left.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to be that blunt and harsh. I can, because I don't have to work for anybody, so. Anyway, and then the second part is symbolization. When you symbolize a people, you can use words or you can use actual symbols, and then that also further puts them in a classification. Like every time when I was growing up, every time you saw a picture of what was supposed to be a native image, it had a headband and long braids, and the skin was red, and
like in the old movies.
Yeah, that's a symbolization. Or like the Washington Redskins, those people, how they dress up, and that's symbolizing us that in an inappropriate way. Mm-hmm. And so then that further classifies us as not a normal human, right? Not human. And that's when things start really getting bad. And it's not so much for us older people, because we know, they're just a drunk person acting stupid. But our children see that, and then there's shame that goes along with that. Like when I used to go to the John Wayne movies and stuff when I was a young girl up in Sioux City, people would be cheering for the cavalry, and I'd be sinking down in my chair.
Yeah.
And one time I saw a movie up there, I must have been in high school. I and my sister and a couple of friends, we went up there, and the Indians started winning, and I jumped up and started hollering, "All right, yay, we're winning," like that. And everybody in the crowd and then I was like, I caught myself, and I was like, it's kind of one of those oh shit moments. I might get beat up or something. So I sat down real quick. But people were there from my hometown, and they brought it up to me later that week. They said, "Wow, we heard you were so happy the natives were winning in that movie." I said, "Yeah," and they said, "Well, that's good, because they don't win very often, So you grow up with that symbolization, and it makes you feel like you're not good enough. You're not good enough to be a cavalry soldier, you're not good enough to be a teacher, whatever,
Yeah.
So that's the symbolization is the second part of the genocide. Jump in whenever you're ready.
Yeah,
You okay?
I'm fine.
Okay. Then discrimination is the third part. So we have classification, symbolization, discrimination. So here's where you start to you see the colonizer, the power structure of where it is you're at, start saying, well, you can't open a bank account here. You start getting followed around in the stores.
Yeah.
You know, because you look native, and so then they're going to follow you around, make sure you don't steal something or whatever, you know, as if you would do that anyways. And then you can't get jobs, you can't. When I came here in 1974 to work for the Indian Health Service, I was like a GS7. In those days, that was like big money. And I went to Wall Hill to the bank to open a bank account. And that banker, the lady at the counter called the president of the bank to talk to me. Because I said, I would like to open a bank account. I just got a new job in Winnebago, and I was living in Wall Hill. And the president of the bank, who shall remain nameless, everybody will know who he is. He might have passed away by now, I'm not sure. He said, well, what is it you need? I said, well, I got a new job and working for Indian Health Service in Winnebago at the hospital. I'd like to open a bank account here. And he's like, well, are you going to keep any money in it? You know how you guys do. Yeah. Open a bank account, overdraw, and he said that to me. And at this time, I had a master's degree in health services, and I was stunned. I had never been treated quite that bluntly before. And I went to school in South Dakota where they killed us in the 60s. And this was like, I was like, hey, I'm from here. And the guy said, well, you're going to keep, and I said, you know what, sir? Never mind. And I turned around and I kept my banking over at my hometown in Whiting, where I'd banked since I was 10 years old. But he said that to me, and I was so shocked that anybody would discriminate that way. And that wasn't the first and last time that happened around here.
Yeah, and it continues to happen.
Oh yeah, it still happens. So that's discrimination. And sometimes it's real blunt and sometimes it's real subtle, you know. And since then I've learned that you got to watch where you go. Like one time I drove across southern South Dakota for some reason. I don't even know why, but I stopped in a couple of towns that were predominantly non-native, because there's a lot of reservations across there, right? And you could tell right away that they did not appreciate me being in there. Mm. You just know that, you know. So discrimination's a third step. So we got classification, symbolization, discrimination, and then the next step, 4, is real blatant, is the dehumanization. In the beginning, when the colonizer came and they started calling us heathens and savages, that is not a name that you apply to humans.
Yes.
So the thing about dehumanization, and we see that all through war, we gave names to our enemy, right? As the United States of America, we called the Japs, the Nips, the slant eyes in Vietnam, all of those ragheads, whatever we called them. And the reason a people dehumanizes or calls people those kinds of names is so you can kill them without guilt. And
not see them as humans.
Not see them as humans. So when they started the bounty on Indian hides back in the 1860s, they didn't call us brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts and grandmas. They called us redskins. Oh, you brought in 3 redskins, 2 kids and a woman and a man. Okay, that's $20 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So that's the dehumanization part, when you start to be called a redskin or heathen, savage, prairie nigger, excuse my language. My son's been called that. And those kinds of words that dehumanize you. And once again, it's when you get old enough, you should be able to take that person out with the right cross. But when you're a little kid and you hear those things, that sticks with you. It's hard to undo that.
And then in your mind, it makes you feel like you aren't the same as everyone else.
Right.
And I think in government documents, don't they refer to us? What is the word they refer? Was it chattel or something like that?
We were considered as chattel to the federal government. And chattel is the same as cows and sheep and buildings and tractors. And it's not humans, but we were considered chattel to the federal government. And for many, many years, our affairs were under the Department of the Army. Before they created the Bureau of Indian Affairs, we were under the Department of the Army, the Department of Defense. So, do you put humans, when you're going to handle human populations, are they chattel, and are they, do they wards of the federal government? That's in the law in the Marshall Trilogy. That's really dehumanizing. Then when they used to kill us in the wars, they say, oh, well, we have so many enemy casualties, or enemy people are killed. They don't ever say, well, we killed 5 moms, 10 uncles, 2 brothers. We don't ever say that when we talk about our war, who we've killed in our wars. They're always enemy combatants or whatever. They're not humans. So that's dehumanization. And I think that the Congress is more careful with the law these days in how they describe us. But still, there's laws that go back 1823 when we talk about Johnson versus McIntosh. 1823, where we were considered incapable of conveying land. So these people are like, they call us people, these tribes are like wards to a guardian. Mm-hmm. So they are conquered nations. They are unable not able legally to convey land. So that means we couldn't buy or sell our land without the government's permission. So that goes clear back to 1823. And then there was another one, that was Johnson versus McIntosh, and then there was Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, and then there was, what was his? Worcester versus Georgia. And all of those, they don't call us legal kind of things. We're like these wards to the federal government, where we are unable to make these decisions about land, about who can come and open businesses, or who can come and work with us on our lands. The government was going to be in control of all of that.
So is that still happening today?
Oh yeah.
Like in our trust lands?
Yep. Yep, you have to go through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, right?
Yeah.
Even us as landowners, we've had land here since 1887. And if we want to sell it, we have to go through all of those hoops to jump to give it back to the tribe. Mm-hmm. Sell it back to the tribe. And of course, since the Cobell case, everything is really confusing now too, because then she proved that they were mishandling the individual Indian accounts. And that was settled in 1996 or something. And then since then, we've been dealing with that, undoing all of that mess. And the tribe's been buying back land, which is good, but geez, 500 years? Come on,
yeah.
200-300 years? People have been buying and selling land, even our own Indian land, legally, even though they weren't supposed to. They've been buying and selling our Indian land since the first wagon train came through. So anyway, dehumanization. Organization is a process whereby the colonizer or the oppressor gets organizations and stuff formed to maintain this discrimination and this dehumanization. We see that today in some of these militia groups that are, come to these protests and cause trouble and shoot Black Lives Matter people and stuff. These guys are organized. I just heard a thing on public radio yesterday where there was a guy that's writing that he has researched these militia groups and these white nationalist groups and these extreme right groups, and they are the ISIS of this country. Mm-hmm. That's what he called them.
I think I might have read.
Did you hear that? Yeah. He says that these guys are the new what are they called over there in Afghanistan and Iraq and that? Anyway, the ISIS and the other group, militant group, terrorist group, they're the ones, now they're here in this country. And they're predominantly white, and, you know, they dehumanize people who are different. They classify them, they put symbols up, and they kill people. And they terrorize movements that are trying to break down some of these barriers that we've been fighting all these years.
And then they try to justify their hate crimes, basically. It's
Right.
just hate crimes
Right.
against people
Yeah.
in our own country.
Right. So that's something we need to keep an eye on, because especially as tribal groups, you know, we cannot bear arms. In our treaties, it keeps us from bearing arms against the federal government. But these guys can bear arms.
Yeah.
What's wrong with this? And I'm not saying that we can't carry guns and have permits and all that kind of stuff. But if we were to get together, let's say we're gonna get the brothers of the Niso Chachi together, you know, and we're gonna defend our borders. Well, shoot, that FBI would be in here like stink on crap.
Yeah.
And have them boys on the ground and girls, because I know you'd sign up. Just kidding. And, you know, they'd
Probably
be
would.
shipped off to Leavenworth or Canyon City or somewhere without a trial even, or shot. And so those are the kind of things we got to pay attention to, because that's what, how organized the enemy is.
But, I mean, so even
Against
with
us.
all this COVID thing and whatever, we couldn't protect ourselves from anyone coming in, right?
Well, I'm guessing Chicago did.
Chicago did.
Anybody who came from Iowa or one of these other states, they had to quarantine for 2 weeks before they could get into Chicago. Those cities shut it down. They checked people at airports, and if you were just flying through, they could let you through, but if you came to go to Chicago, they made you quarantine. Well, it depends on if you see them as the oppressor, the colonizer. Duh,
Yeah.
I guess they are.
Yes.
So they may blatantly play a role at times. Like if we look back at the Andrew Jackson reign of terror when he was the president, and then if we come forward and look at some of the other presidents, Nixon, who, for all of his foibles, he was really pretty good to the tribes because he got the Self-Determination Act through, right?
Yeah.
But it's still the United States government, and it's hard to say that they're this, that, or the other, but they are the colonizer. Because of our status as federally recognized tribes, we're under law, federal Indian law. And we're a treaty tribe, so we're under the treaty mandates. However, that's played out over the last, I don't know, when was the last treaty? 1855 or something? I don't remember. There were a bunch of treaties between the Ho-Chunk and the government starting in 1823 or 29. And before that, there was a lot of stuff that went on between the French and the Ho-Chunk, and you know, there was always somebody over us wanting our stuff or our land or whatever.
Or resources.
Right, or
whatever.
resources.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and what an oppressor does is they organize themselves and institutionalize, I guess, this us and them.
Yeah.
You know, so they're organized, like we were talking about the white nationalists. I mean, they freely talk about that stuff now, and I'm just like shocked that the government is so free to talk about the white nationalists and the left. What do they call that? the liberal left terrorists or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's organization, you know, even though maybe they don't have bylaws and all of that, but they've been verbalized and everybody's kind of getting classified into which group are you, you know, where do you stand in all of this. So the organization in the genocide, what they started to do was get a newspaper in the country to start demeaning the Jews and these other groups that they picked out, homosexuals and everybody. So they start demeaning those groups in the press, or in this case in Germany when they did it against the Jews. You know, they had a symbol for them, and they had them separated into groups and defined, and then, you know, now they're going to start getting people organized against those groups.
And media still does that.
Yes, they do. You know, you don't hear very much about natives anymore, but we have to pay attention, because behind the scenes,
Yes.
like last year, the administration took protection for the sacred Bears Ears and Staircase Escalante out of protection,
Yes.
and opened it up, you know, so
So there's still a lot of work being done to dismantle us,
Right.
take from us behind the scenes.
Right.
The government.
and it organizes these groups to go in and open it up for uranium mining or whatever. And from what I understand, Bears Ears and Staircase Escalante are the last vestiges of ancient ruins and artifacts left in this country of the indigenous people that were here first. So they're going in and they're just, you know,
We're going to destroy
just,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
In the same way, they opened up this year again Anwar, which is the Alaska Native Wildlife area, up, you know, in the Bering Sea or up there north. And those tribes up there are the caribou hunters and stuff.
Yes.
And a few years ago, the oil companies had given up because it's too expensive to drill up there. But now, I don't know what happened, but this administration, the government opened it up again. They
I
had
seen that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, just recently, and it's like, what? You know, and the caribou hunters, they're not a big, powerful tribe like the Peacocks or the Ho-Chunks, you know. They're a small subsistence living people up there, and, you know.
Isn't one of our representatives up there Alaskan? I remember we were having issues with the COVID funding getting to tribes, and she was...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what was her name? I don't remember her name.
Yeah, that representative from Alaska.
Yeah.
I can't remember her name either, but yeah. I want to say Helen, but she's New Mexico.
No, that's dead. Yeah, that from New Mexico. Okay, so we'll move to polarization.
Okay. And this gets back at that from organization then, you know, you really do, the oppressor will do what do you call it? Big campaign to get people to turn on a certain group. So you polarize. Like right now in our country, there's this black and white polarization.
Yeah.
There's the rich and there's the not rich, and you know, we have this real serious separation, and the haves and the have-nots, and they talk about it all the time in the press. So when you hear it, you're like, well, where am I? You know, I don't. You know, if I'm brown or black, I'm probably with the have-nots,
Yeah.
with the Black Lives Matters and those other guys. And then if I'm with a certain group of the politic, then I'm with the haves, or if I'm certain financial status and whatnot. So they polarize you, and then you absolutely don't want nothing to do, or you don't want to be identified at all with that other group, whatever that other is.
Yeah.
And they did that here. They started, I think it really started a long time ago, but for sure it was institutionalized with the Allotment Act. You were either blood or not. And if you weren't, you didn't get land, but still, when they were handing out this land, who came to get free land? Non-natives who said, oh yeah, I'm a half-breed.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's kind of polarization too, that it works in the opposite way, I guess, because then these folks got land and they were not native. And that happened all over the country when they opened up the Allotment Act in 1887. So, and that's when the blood quantum thing first started, you know. But there were folks around who probably were Italian or whatever, and, you know, mixed blood. They'd come and, yeah, I'm part Indian. And they just got 160 acres or 80 acres. And there you have it. You know, then the land is, you know. And so then there's the haves, and, you know, we got land and we do not, you know.
So is that, is blood quantum a form of that?
Yeah,
With that
you bet.
polarization?
It's polarization, you bet it is. And, you know, you had experienced that when I was young. There was that, oh, wow, you're not a full blood.
Mm-hmm.
You know what, I don't know what difference that makes if you're trying to work and help and do the best you can and identify what difference does it make.
Yeah.
But you would get told that, so that's polarization. And then once you get that in within groups, then you can't stand together to survive the genocide. And
so
then
we're always fighting amongst each other.
Yeah, and then after a while, people who are not accepted in that polarized group that's kind of left out, then pretty soon then they aren't. Yeah, no, I'm not native.
Yeah.
No, are you kidding? Ew. You know?
Yeah.
And I knew people like that, you know, and my mom did too, because she was of the age where if you wanted to go into a store or go to a club or something in Sioux City, you couldn't be native.
Mm-hmm.
So people denied that identity, and that happens in polarization. You deny who you are. And we saw that in the Holocaust too with the Jewish people.
Yeah.
And, you know, so that's just a survival thing. You know, you got to survive, and if you're looking at the next group where they do persecution, they start rounding you up.
Oh, preparation is 7.
Oh, sorry, preparation. Yeah. They're identified and separated out because of their ethnic or religious identity. So what happened in the 1860s? The reservation.
Yeah.
So in the reservation era, you couldn't be native and be off a reservation. That's why old Custer got his butt kicked. Those tribal people, all those tribes were off their reservations at the time. What was that, 1876? But they were there legally. The government allowed them to go. That was called the neutral ground between the Bighorns and the Black Hills. Mm-hmm. And they could go there and do their hunts and do their ceremonies and marry and do whatever they do, but then they had to go back to the reservation. Well, Custer saw them out there and said, wow, they're all, you know, they're all eating and hunting and partying, and so we'll just go and kill them all. And they were legally where they were supposed to be, the Lakotas, Cheyenne, and all of them. But they separated them out, and then because they were all together, he tried to kill them all.
So with this preparation...
And they were supposed to be on the reservation. That's what he thought gave him the right to go kill them. Because they were supposed to be on the res. That was the law.
They were still abiding by the law.
Yes.
So in preparation, it talks about ethnic cleansing. So what does that mean?
If you are a member of that identified persecuted group, that dehumanized, discriminated against group, then you shouldn't be allowed to have children or live. Mm-hmm. So, did they sterilize people? Well, we went through that too, sterilization. That's ethnic cleansing.
Sterilization, and that happened for blacks. Is that still happening?
I think it ended in the very recently, like 80s or 90s.
Yeah,
Native women too. There was a big report done on that here last year, I think, about that process that went on for our Native women. like they would go to have a baby or have, some medical treatment, and the hospital would just, the doctors would decide, well, let's just sterilize.
And not tell the person.
No, not
They
tell
would
them.
just do it.
No
What is
informed
that
person.
called? It was called.
Ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, I
Sterilizing.
know, but it was called something else in
Oh.
the thing that I was reading.
Yeah, and then the only good Indian is a dead Indian.
Mm-hmm.
That's the military's, they're, the only good Indian I ever saw was dead. So the only good Indian is a dead Indian. That's ethnic cleansing. And then the Redskins, the whole bounty on people. Or like when the Jews, what first started happening with them is that everything was cut off from them and they were not allowed to get food or jobs or anything. So the Nazis started gathering them up, like the reservation.
Mm-hmm.
And as they gathered them up, they noticed that, they would get so weak and they were hungry and they were dying. And that's when they decided, well, they'd be better off if we just dropped them in a hole and shot them all, So they started ethnic cleansing. And we see that in Africa too, with the Tutsis and the Hutus and Rwanda and Uganda. And it's still going on with the Yazidis in Syria, is it? Yemen. There's a ethnic group of Muslim people that are being taken out because they're cleansing the existence of them because of their religion.
And is that a part of when they were taking our children to boarding schools and they would decline them their family's food or whatever if they didn't?
Yeah, that could be a part of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that persecution. Yeah, and they would beat them for speaking their language. And
Well, I mean, families in general, like if they didn't send their child, they
Oh,
kept
they
their
would-
children home.
they would
And
not give them their rations.
They wouldn't give
right,
them their rations
Right.
and whatever.
Right.
Okay, persecution.
Well, that's throwing you in jail, throwing you on the reservation, not letting you leave, hanging you if you step off, anything like that where you're unjustly tried and you're persecuted, for whatever you do that isn't what the oppressor wants you to do, then, they're going to come down hard on you with law or discrimination or punishment or whatever. And that's those tribal leaders that ran to Canada, like Bigfoot, the Bigfoot band they went north to try to hide out from the reservation era. And when they came back, the remnants of the 7th Cavalry, which was Custer's cavalry, heard they were coming back, and since they were renegades, they went out to Wounded Knee and just killed everybody. That's persecution for leaving and for running and for being a part of the people that killed our soldiers. Then we're going to kill you.
And then I think most recently, because I just seen one of the water protectors was just released yesterday or
Yeah.
the day before. That was persecution for standing up for
Yep.
the water rights
Yeah,
at
that's-
Standing Rock.
Spraying
The chemical
fire hoses,
irritants
chemicals
and,
and stuff in the dead of winter. I mean,
and locking them in the dog kennels.
tearing
and all
down
that.
their camps and their fire, and yeah, that's persecution.
Mhm.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be violent. It can just be not helping you at all,
Shunning you.
Yeah, shunning you.
And we do that today.
Yeah, banishment.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we do that against ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Shun each other.
well, we do every one of these things against each other because that's what we've been taught from the oppressor, from the colonizer. And, and not that we're sold out to the idea of colonization, but if that's what you know,
And the only thing you know.
right,
So that's what you do to yourselves and your
and
people.
yeah, and your own family even,
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's hard to overcome unless you know that that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And we don't like to admit that we're doing stuff like that, you know?
Or we don't, have an understanding of it.
And then extermination occurs when hate groups begin killing their victims because they do not believe their victims are fully human.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when, like during World War II, the Nazis came up with a phrase called the final, what was it called?
I know.
The final solution.
Yeah.
Well, the final solution was the concentration camps.
Mm-hmm.
And just killing millions and millions of Jewish people any way they could. And at first they were shooting them, but you know, too many bullets. So then they started gassing and starving them and all of those kinds of things. So, and I think about like the treatment of our Ho-Chunk people when we came up the river and they were taking us to Fort Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
They moved us up there in the dead of winter. And the soldiers up there even said, you know, and that was like a final solution. That's like extermination. There were no rations, no cows.
Yeah.
Old man Felix White told me his story he heard was that the women would go around to horse dung and pick the corn that didn't get digested out and mash it up to feed the babies and the little kids.
Yeah. I think I heard that story.
Yeah, that's horrible. That's extermination. They know you're going to die in the freezing cold.
Yeah.
You don't have any food or shelter. And that happened all over Indian country back in those days, you know. They move people who are used to water and fish and green, move them out in the middle of the prairie where there's no water or anything, or up to Long Prairie in northern Minnesota is like a desolate prairie.
Yeah.
And they force moved us up there. That's a death sentence, a death march.
And then along with that, you know, all those removals and death and trauma, that's all historical trauma, which we still carry.
Right,
with
we
us
still
today.
carry that. And that's why maybe that's part of the reason why we pick on each other sometimes. Choose sides, you know, because we still have that predisposition to not trust and to, you know, want to survive, but, you know, it's a lot of times we feel like it's either them or us. And that goes back to this symbolization discrimination part too, you know. It's them or us, even though we're the same people.
Yeah, so we're using it still against ourselves.
Yeah. And that's how genocide works. It doesn't necessarily have to be a death camp, but it can be cultural, language, social. How do we bury our dead? What are the funerary social ways? Marriage, naming, adopting, taking of relatives, other ceremonies, you know. How do we do those things anymore? Well, a lot of people, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. Or if somebody knows, then they're afraid to tell anybody because they say, oh, you think you know everything, oh, you don't know. You know, we give each
Or
other...
it gives them a sense of false importance.
Yeah.
I like to call them cultural hoarders because then they don't
Oh,
share. Yeah.
There was a perfect example of that when I first came back to the res to teach in 96 when computers first started being around and we first started getting the internet and stuff. It was dial-up then.
Yeah.
There was one young man, I was working for NICC at Macy, and there was one young man at the tribal college, or at the tribal offices, that knew how to troubleshoot the computers.
Uh-huh.
And you know, nobody knew anything, barely knew how to turn them on. And if he didn't like you, he wouldn't tell you. He wouldn't help your office or anything.
Yeah.
Which, that really bolstered the colleges to start teaching that stuff, you know. But that's a hoarder. That's a cultural hoarder. He knew how to take care of this stuff, but he wouldn't tell anybody unless they either paid him or he liked them. He was a friend. And we see that all the time in our culture. well, I don't know, you know, what are you going to do with it? How should I tell you? Why should I tell you, you know?
Or what are you going to give me?
Yeah, what do I get out of it?
And our people weren't like that. They weren't
No.
Consumers or
No.
worried about money or what they could get out of anything.
Right, because for the culture and the tribe to survive, you had to teach others and share. You had to do that, or else you were dead. People were, you know, those roles and those responsibilities, when they go, then what are you?
Nothing.
You know?
So then the oppressor
they
or colonizers,
win.
they did their job.
I've heard people with the government a lot of times in my experience say, shoot, we don't do anything to you Indians anymore. You're doing it to yourselves.
Yeah, we're doing the job.
Yeah,
like they just sit back
yeah,
and
we're
watch.
socially misbehaving, and yeah, they just like, oh, and after
We're
all
all
we've
against
done,
each other and fighting amongst each other.
their attitude is either one of a martyr, after all I've done for you, or they're a zealot. After all we've done for you, you're still screwing yourselves, so forget it, you know. And unfortunately, that's the way the oppressor is. And then, number 10, denial. Oh, well, we tried to help you guys.
Yeah.
Look what you did to yourselves.
We gave you everything you needed.
Yeah. And you still, locked you on those reservations early on so you'd have a home? What the hell? But anyway, it works. Cultural genocide is alive and still going on, and we see that by the very fact that on our reservations, and it's not just here but everywhere, there's only, 2/3 of our people live off, and they work out, and there's not jobs or things for them to do back here to bolster our culture or our economy or our, and I know that tribal leadership everywhere tries to take care of that, but it's hard when you're working under the oppressor.
Yeah.
And under the law.
So if you think about these 10 stages and oppression and being colonized, our people being colonized. So we are being colonized. So can we then in turn be colonizing our own people or other people?
Yeah, it's called internalized oppression.
Okay.
Then we turn all of these things in on them.
And our own selves.
Right.
Our own people.
In our own people. And then in the meantime, this is a thing I see happen a lot. It happens a lot with my native brothers out in the world. I've taught at 3 or 4 universities where there were a lot of native men who teach or try to get up the ranks and stuff. They get the idea, and women do this too, everybody does this. We get the idea that, oh, I'm in with these white guys. I'm in with this institution. So, I'm an in and I'm this and that. But when it comes down to budget cuts, program cuts, downsizing, or if you step out of line, who's going to be the first one to go? The Browns! Get them out of there. They're, they don't fit in anymore. And many institutions, what's their names? Carnegie's called it institutional encouragement. No. What is it? Institutional discouragement, but the first part is societal encouragement, institutional discouragement. Because once you get in the institution, it's a colonizer. Like the universities, they want things a certain way, and oh yeah, we love you Indian people, but once you get here, you gotta act like us white guys. Yeah. Publish or perish and do all this. When in reality, your gift or your product you bring to the university might be just a different worldview on how to pass along education and information and culture. And they're like, oh, well, you can't publish that, and we can't make money on that. You can't get grants on that. So we have to sell out. And I've seen many of my brothers go down the tubes trying to be like the white guy wearing a shirt and tie and being all, but they don't ever get asked to join the country club. Yeah. Or live in their neighborhood.
Yeah, they're still different from...
Yeah, you're still brown, and so I used to tell my one friend that. I said, don't forget, look. I said, they're not going to let you in. Oh, yeah, well, all I got to do is blah, blah, blah. And I said, and they didn't.
Yeah.
So then they get mad at me. Why did you tell me the truth? I don't know what that's about. Don't tell us the truth. We don't want to know that because we're oppressed. We want to be lied to.
Yeah. Keep lying to us. And
Yeah, just keep lying and
to...
enable us to hurt ourselves, I guess. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. And, you know, I live on my family farm. And I live way out in the country with the chickens and the pheasants. So who am I? I don't live in West Omaha or...
We recognize it,
Yeah.
and we, I guess, stop lying to ourselves about, you know, what's happening, all this fighting amongst ourselves, and, you know, recognize that we have this trauma, and, you know, the past has happened.
Mm-hmm. It's hard, but you really have to educate yourself about it. And you can't just take one person's word.
Yeah.
You have to do lots of reading and talking to your relatives and start pasting together those incidences and things that have happened for the last 400 or 500 years. Because it's hard to know the truth, but the reality is you have to just make your own truth.
Mm-hmm.
So you're either going to undo it or you're not. You know, you just have to make that decision. And then in your behavior toward your relatives and your other tribal members, you have to quit oppressing. You have to make yourself quit. In the way that I follow, we've been taught by my teachers, no judging. If somebody isn't doing what you want them to do, or you think they should be doing, or not behaving in a certain way, you aren't supposed to judge. That's not your place. That's God's work. And the spirits. Your job is to take care of yourself. Do what you're supposed to do in a right way or appropriate way. You know, don't judge everybody else. You know. So, and that's hard for me to do. I like to be real judgmental about people, you know. And it's hard to not say, oh, well, they don't know what they're saying or doing. You know, you just have to let them be, because you're not going to change anybody but yourself. So I think that's the first step, is educating yourself and then picking that path you're going to go on. You know, if you're going to follow a path of hateful and meanness and grudging, that's my mom. I said, Mom, don't be so hateful or judging. I'm a grudger. I'm a grudger. I said, you know, and then my little sister's the same way, I think. But, you know, I'm just like, that doesn't do you any good. People don't like me or you don't like what they do, then just leave them alone.
Yeah. Don't
say anything. And that's hard, because you really want to go, oh, and make those, you know, like, oh, geez, that girl, you know, and stuff like that. But it's hard not to do, but I think that's the first step.
Educating ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And just deciding, I'm going to be this way. I'm going to be this balanced, harmonious, forgiving, whatever way. Now, granted, you got to protect yourself. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't let the weirdos come in and teach your kids another way. You know what I mean? But you have to decide for yourself, and then you have to watch over them kids, because there's lots of forces out there that want to kill who they are. I don't know how else to put it in a nice way. They want to kill their language, kill their beliefs, their attitude, their love, their compassion. My little grandson is so compassionate. He just gets really hurt by the way other kids behave. Mm-hmm. Not only toward him, but toward other people. He's a real compassionate guy, and, you know, he's always telling us how his feelings are hurt because people treated his friend bad or something, you know.
Yeah.
And in today's world, a young man that has that kind of compassion can get, that culture can be drummed out of him pretty quick. Because we live in that kind of culture where, beat them, run over them,
So speaking of children, like how do we teach? You okay?
Yeah.
How do we teach children within the tribe what cultural genocide is?
Well, it starts in the family, of course. And I know the developmental levels of kids, they know by watching their family, their new kid, whoever they're living with, they know that, oh, this is the way I should be. So if that family is having a hard time, or if they're mean or hateful, or if they're drinking, or if they're fighting each other or whatever, that's how they're going to grow up. So from the beginning, you have to, as a parent, grandparent, if you're responsible for those kids, you have to create that safe, warm, non-judgmental, spiritual place, safe place for them. And it's hard, it's hard in this day and age, I think, to do that. And then there's TV and video games, and you have to really keep them in touch with your traditional belief, however you define that, I think. But it starts in the home. And they say it even starts before that, in the womb. The epigenetics, the historic trauma stuff, starts in the womb. So if mom and if that baby in utero is growing up in a violent, chaotic, sick place, if it's developing in that, it'll be born knowing that.
And already having that.
And already have that trauma. And then the genetics are changed, so then they pass it on. And that's scientific truth today. It's called epigenetics. And that's why the Holocaust survivors of the Nazi genocide, the Jewish genocide, it took 7 generations to wash that out with no more trauma. So if we're traumatic in our home and we're having babies, they're going to know trauma, and they're going to have babies that know trauma.
Yeah.
And on and on and on. It takes 7 generations of no more trauma. And that's what they used to tell us, the old timers. Do today what's going to affect 7 generations. You have to think about that when you plan. And if we look back, 7 generations, probably about the time they put us here. 1865, 1855, somewhere in there. So we've been 7 generations here, trying to... But we've been trying to undo it, but it kind of has not been done yet.
So we still got generations to go to get over the historical.
Yeah, but you can break those cycles. People can break those cycles. I believe that they can. I've seen, I'm in recovery, an alcoholic, and I changed cycles for my own kids. I adopted 2 little kids that are fetal alcohol when I got them, and I right away, whatever that voice is, or said, who do you think you are? You're a hypocrite. You're still drinking and this and that. So I quit. 32 years. My son is 32. He was just a baby when I got him, adopted him, and that was hard work. To bring him up in a sober home. He's never known booze in my house. And neither is my daughter. And they're shocked that anybody even comes and says, can I bring some beers? No, we don't do that here, And he's had his struggles with alcohol, but he don't bring it to my house. Ever.
And that's part of breaking the cycle, right?
Right.
Which is the same with my grandson. I'm working on my 9th year of sobriety, and he doesn't have that in our home.
Right, you don't know it.
Yeah.
So if you grow up not knowing that, then you're like, okay, this is the way love and compassion and understanding and safety is. And that's what Faith Spotted Eagle says too. When that alcohol comes in the room, that's when, how did she call it? Hurt or pain or violence. That's what she said. That's when violence comes in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So if you grow up with that, and I did, my dad drank, and I knew that, He wasn't that violent, but it was scary.
Yeah.
Because he was grumpy.
Yeah.
So you're like tiptoeing around, walking on eggshells. And that gave me permission to do that.
Yeah.
So, it
True.
just keeps...
That's what happened.
Right. Luckily,
Many of us, actually.
yeah, luckily my mom never drank. She said, I grew up around drunks. She said, I don't want no drunks. So she used to get after my dad and everything. And she always told us that, but, I thought, oh, well, Dad can do it. I can do it.
Okay, so the final question of this is, why is it important for non-natives to know what cultural genocide is?
So they straighten up. So they will quit, I guess. That's what my short answer. And to recognize that we are, as tribal nations, at some level we're victims of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's nothing they can do to fix that by throwing money at it or programs or whatever. They have to support us trying to do stuff our own way, whatever that is. And I think that there's a lot of really good meaning non-native people out there that want to help us. But, I don't know if we need help so much as we need understanding and support for us to do things our own way.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what I look at it anyways. And
I think, if my thought is that if non-natives understand what cultural genocide is, then they too can break that cycle.
exactly. Because they're suffering too.
They are, yeah.
Especially now in this country. Oh my goodness, it's all upside down,
It is. It's a bit frightening for my grandson.
Yes. I was just telling my partner this morning, I said, the world's on fire. We're just upside down. The whole thing is like, in Lakota tradition, they have the clowns, the heokas, the contraries. That's what it seems like. We're living in a contrary existence. It's just like, I don't know. It's just so much craziness.
Yeah,
You can't.
It is crazy.
I have to sometimes just shut everything off and sit in the quiet and watch the birds run around, and just bring myself back and pray.
And reconnect.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we do ceremony at our house a lot. So this morning when our refrigerator was getting ready to blow up, I was sure of it. I lit my smudge and I prayed for that refrigerator. That's how I do. And in that, I don't know if it helped the refrigerator or not, but it calmed me down because I was ready to be nervous.
Yeah.
Because the refrigerator costs what, $1,000 these days? I don't even know. There's my Social Security. Going to Coleman's Appliance. But, and then the refrigerator straightened up. I gave thanks then. Who knew? Who knew smudge would fix a refrigerator? For all you people listening out there, just remember that. We forgot to pray.
Oh, I did pray. And you were supposed to bring me some stuff.
I know, and completely, that's my son's fault.
But I think we're done here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carolyn,
And
for
thank
coming
you
in.
all for watching.
Yeah, thank you for listening. I'll be here all week.